Hello.
Hi.
And welcome to another edition of Story World Explorers, where we're exploring the story world of Candala.
So Candala is a comic book written by Rizky Arrydesta, all the way from Indonesia. We can finally say that we're a worldwide podcast.
Worldwide podcast.
This is a fantastic story world that's set in medieval Indonesia, the Majapahit Empire, which was a trading powerhouse back in the 1300s. Absolutely fantastic, really riveting story world that takes a epic and actually makes it true.
Yeah, right, exactly. It blends myth and the actual things that are happening in a very, it's a world full of magic, demons, blood, and guts.
Yeah, it's very exciting. The first 3 chapters are available on ToonTube to read. So you can get right into it if you end up enjoying it.
Yeah, right.
So stick around. More to come.
Enjoy the show.
All right, we're back on Story World Explorers here with Rizky Arrydesta, talking about the great story world or the great comic book Candala. Rizky, we met you via another gentleman named Max on ToonTube, and he recommended you as a potential story world that we should explore. And honestly, I'm really glad that he did. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here, and we're talking to you literally on the other side of the world. You're in Indonesia, and our times are exactly the same. Just one's morning and one's night.
12 hours
Yeah.
apart.
Yes, it's quite late right now. But hello, my name is Rizky Arrydesta. I am a manga artist, a manga creator as well. I'm a writer as well. I'm also a teacher as well, and so I am writing this this manga, web manga actually. Well, you know it as a graphic novel or comic book. It's called Candala, and we will talk about it in here. So I hope you guys enjoy it.
Yeah. So Candala we're literally talking about medieval Indonesia, right? The Majapahit Empire, which was a huge trading empire, with, if you can imagine, the Indonesia in between Australia and mainland Asia, all those little islands that are all over the place. There was once ruled the majority of by the Majapahit Empire.
And you were saying earlier that it might be like over 400 islands in total there.
No, it's 18,000 islands.
18. Oh, well, I did say over 400
You did,
islands.
yes. Technically, you were correct.
Maybe you said over 400 islands that they haven't explored yet, or
Right.
Well, as to just to set the scale, Indonesia is consisted around 18,000 islands with 400 different tribes, 400 of them. And also, if we total, there's a total of around 700 language, including the dialects. So the base language is around 380, and if you add the dialects on it, well, we got around 700 language. So for a kingdom to rule in such vast area and and a lot of tribes and kingdoms, smaller kingdoms, it's a really good, really big one. So you can call it a dynasty.
Yeah, I mean that's so crazy. It's taking control of and then maintaining an empire of that magnitude with all those different languages. Now, granted, I don't know how often you're getting visited by people from the royal court to one of those 1,800 islands often, but still, I mean, it's really impressive in the magnitude. One of the things that's really interesting about Candala setting wise, and we're going to dive into an epic that's from the Indus River Valley that has been used throughout the Asian cultures in a lot of different varieties of ways, especially in Indonesia, and what it means in that area. But one of the interesting things is that, we don't really hear a lot about medieval times in the Asian world, right? Especially not Indonesia. Like when we were talking and you mentioned the Majapahit Empire, the only reason why I even had a reference for it was because one of the video games I play, Civilization 7, has the Majapahit Empire as one of them that you can become. And I was like, oh, I recognize that name. You're right. It was like all this trade stuff. I have a very loose understanding. So the setting's immediately interesting, right? It's immediately interesting. I mean, thankfully, it's not medieval times in England, because Lord knows we're drowning in those stories. So let's talk about Ramayana, okay? And it's an epic from the Indus River Valley.
Yes.
I'll have you explain it. I have, once again, very loose like names and places and stuff, but it's very important to the setting of Candala.
Yeah. So Ramayana is actually a very basic story, it's a prince trying to save the princess from the captive of the evil demon king. That's the baseline of the story. That's the baseline of Ramayana. The prince is Rama, Sri Rama, and the princess is Sita, and also the demon king is Ravana. So the demon king is actually a demon kind. So he is from a race called Raksasa, which is later on also the not descendant, what is it called, ancestor of the main antagonist in my story. And so basically the hero saved the princess and slain the demon king. That's how the story always ends, except in Indonesia. Because in Indonesia, the demon king, in Indonesian version actually, the demon king actually can't be killed. So the hero, the Rama, had to collapse an entire mountain on him just to decapitate him. But even then, he is not truly dead yet. So that is the base premise and lore that I took for the antagonist in Candala. Because after that, well, the king is dead, the demon king is dead. What happened to all of his subjects? Well, in the story that now in all version, it's almost the same. They got banished by the new king called Mayasura, which has ability to create an entire pocket dimension. So they are banished there, supposedly. But well, in many Indonesian wayang lore, there's always and seemingly always some of the demons that escape and create a new kingdom in the new wayang lore in Indonesia, in the Indonesian version, which spans into more epic and quite unique from the rest of the Southeast Asia. So I started from there. I took a start from there.
Yeah, right. What a great place to start, right? A crazy story with supernatural elements to it, and a bunch of really, I mean, like I said, the empire itself is interesting enough to explore, but then you add these supernatural occurrences. Once again, this demon king, I mean, it's so great. It was such a subtle difference, right? Everywhere else he's dead, but here he got decapitated by a mountain.
But
right?
He's still not dead.
Is he dead? I mean, he doesn't have a head, or his head separated from his body, right? In a lot of ways, he is dead, but that's really an inciting incident for the entire story of Candala, is that question of, is he dead? Is it dead? And in what ways would that be able to be brought
and
back?
if he's not dead, can he be reanimated? Is a big question.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the. You just mentioned the Raksasa, all right?
Yes.
These people that were the subjects of the demon king. In the story of Candala, we hear a lot about Butos.
Yes.
And so, what is a Buto? We'll start off with what's a Buto, because I think that's a really good scene setter. For the story.
In the original version, in India version, Buto and Raksasa is actually two different kind of things. Yes, they're different. But in Indonesia, somehow they got mixed up together into one entirely singular thing. The Raksasa is also called a Buto, but in Indonesian version, they are most commonly known as Buto. So so they're demon kind that it said they're born of fire and they have magical power, and most of them had superpowers as well. Well,
Hmm.
like typical villain in comic books, they have many
Sure.
superpowers, and they ate human, and mostly human, and they got stronger by eating humans. So
Right.
that's one the big problem, because we can have a man-eating giant with superpowers roaming around. So
Right.
that's the base and the main protagonist. And it's not a singular creature, but it's a race. So
Right. Right.
there's whole bunch of them. There's a race
Right.
of them. Yeah. So that's what a Budo is.
Yeah, and another thing about the Buto, right, is that after they consume the flesh of a human, they can
Hmm.
then mask themselves
Yes.
as that
Yeah.
human. So
Yes.
that's what, and that's really, it's kind of an interesting hunting mechanic, right?
Yeah.
Is
Right.
they eat the humans, and then all of a sudden they can pretend to be the lost child of
Yeah.
the person that
Yeah.
they ate, to then eat another one, or to
Yeah. Right.
bring them back for more Buto
Yeah.
to then eat, and then before you know it, you have a whole
Yeah.
army of them.
That
Hmm.
first couple of pages of the comic book kind of highlight that really clear. It was like
Yeah,
I was confused. I'm like, wait, why did she just? Oh no!
yeah.
Then you see the horns coming out of the mouth, and you're like, oh okay, so it was,
Right.
you know,
Hmm.
So it's really interesting because that's the hunting method, right? Of an almost, it's a little Westworldian, if you will, of
mm,
like, is that a role? Is that a Buto, or is that a normal person, right? Like you could see this becoming a real problem
Yeah.
for society if all of
Hmm.
a sudden you're like, oh well, I that they're acting like
mhm.
that person, and then you find
Hmm.
out that they're not, and actually that whole town isn't. It's actually
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
Butos, right?
Yeah.
And they're slowly but surely taking over
Now,
society.
now I have a question.
Hmm.
Just the way I was thinking about it, because as we get deeper into talking about the comic book, you're talking about how there are two worlds. There is like in Kandala, there are the people that actually like live the life, and then there are the
Yes.
nobles that live above
Oh,
that section.
this is a good
Yes.
segue into
Yeah.
the caste system within
and
the
and
Majapahit
so
Hmm.
Empire.
you were talking about how the nobles, they think that the poor people are making up these butos. They don't exist because they're so disconnected from what's actually happening. Do Does it matter to the buto if they eat a noble or a poor person? Does that change the power, or is it just is that more of a human thing versus a buto thing? Do they not care? Is it like I could eat the
Good
president,
question.
or I could eat
Yeah.
the
Well, perhaps before you answer that question, Rizky, maybe you could kind of lay out the caste system the way that it
Oh,
is
okay.
in the Majapahit Empire, and then that'll be easier to answer that question after.
Yes. Yes, because Majapahit Empire is based on Hindu religion. They also adopt the caste system from India, which is mostly separated into two main castes. The Varna, which is the caste that's functional in society, and the Pariah, the one that being an outcast. So the Varna is consists of Brahmana. Brahman mostly became a scholar, also ceremonial leader, religious leader as well, and also they became some kind of a local governing force for lower caste. And then there's also kshatriya. Kshatriya is the noble caste. They are kings, they are politicians, they are knights, they're the noble warrior as well. They wear gold as their accessory. And the more clothes they wore, the higher their rank is.
Mm.
So they have clothes. The more the clothes that they wore, the higher their level in the society of the kshatriya. So even in the inner society, they have more social level as well. And
Yeah, yeah,
then
yeah.
there's the Varia, not Varia. What should I call it? because the spelling is kind of different, you know.
Yeah.
The spelling is kind of different, but they are the stonemasons, they're the builders, they're the craftsmen, they are the engineer, the architects. the they are quite respected in the society. They can wear silver wares, and they are quite high in the society. And then there's the traders, the sudra. Sudra is the traders, the merchants, the worker, the laborer, the farmers, and so on and so on. They're the main uh, working force of the kingdom. And then we have the outcast, the pariah, which is consists of the tukar, the criminals, tukar criminals, or the convicted. And then Meleka is the what's that called? Outsiders, people that came from outside of the kingdom. And then we have Candala. Candala is the, maybe it will be much more interesting if you call it the death dealer, because they always dabble with things that got something to do with death. So
Okay.
their main job is the undertaker, the cremator, also executioner, also bounty hunters, and sometimes also a sword for hire as well. So that's what chandalas are. So they're basically an expendables.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They're basically expendables.
Yeah. So the two separate castes, right? And going back to Jack's question of the Buto and whether or not they prefer eating of the upper group of castes that are in society, or the paria, I believe, right? The paria, the lower caste, where the Candala are located, which we'll get into that, them being expendables, especially in the Candala story world where Ramayana is very true.
Yeah.
So do they, to ask Jack's question again, do the Buto, are they looking for like the expendables flesh? Is that like a thing that they're looking for, or would it not matter if they were to run into one of the higher castes, one of the nobility? Would that be just
is that a human thing, or is that transferred into the
it's a
the
caste
demon
system,
thing?
right?
Is it
caste
just
system.
a purely
Yes.
human thing, or does it actually impact or influence them, or like, because they can wear the faces, maybe it is more beneficial to be a noble, because then you could call anybody to your court, and if they died, no one would care.
Yeah.
You know.
Actually,
So but not only in that way, but is there like, because we've always, in more Western, like, medieval fiction, there's that whole thing about king's blood is more powerful than a poor person's blood, or a soldier's blood. And it's like, how many, even, it's like, in Pirates of the Caribbean, Davy Jones said that Jack Sparrow's soul was worth 100 souls. You know what I
100
mean?
souls. Okay.
You know what I mean? So, like, is there that, or do they just not care?
Actually, there's several aspects to that. The first aspect is the legacy,
Okay.
pure delicacy. One aspect, and then the second aspect is that each person's life force. Well, it will be taught more in the next chapter, in the fourth chapter. Each person's life force that actually the Buto consume is differ in each person. So, but they can sense who got it much more, who got it less, and so if the Buto aim to became stronger, they will find someone with much stronger life force than normal. And usually because of that, the nobles usually have much more life force, because
And that's related to
they're
their legacy?
yes, sometimes it's related to their legacies, and sometimes it's related to their spirituality as well, because in this world, not all people are born equal.
Right.
I want to emphasize that not all people born equal, but they can become something much more with hard work and sometimes breaking the taboo, because that was the Candala arc. Because if you read the story in the first one, the Buto, the antagonist, actually berated the Chandala because you seek aid through, you seek power through forbidden means just to best us, gitu, just to kill us.
Right.
And that will be the main theme in the whole story, because they can took the extreme measures just to
Right.
deal with the extreme issues like the Butos as well.
Yeah,
But
right.
the Buto also does that. They seek
Yeah.
people with the strongest life force and try to eat them.
Right.
That's why they infiltrate.
Mhm.
That's also why there are two kinds of them. The one that bait people to their abode, like in the
Yeah.
forest. Yeah,
Yeah.
a kid is missing. Of course, people will try to find them. But if he actively chase people around, people will be scared of that place, and no one will come to that place. And the second option is to aid that person, and then go back to the village as that person, and then infiltrate that village or some place else, and try to find the person with the strongest life force there, and try to eat
Right.
it.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So like, yeah, there's the strategies of the Buto, right? Because we were even just talking about in that, and Jack mentioned in that first episode really early on, or in the first episode. What am I
Well, I
saying?
mean,
The
first comic.
the first comic, right? The first iteration, right? It was very clearly a Buto that was like baiting, right?
Yeah.
Somebody, they weren't inside of, it wasn't inside of a society or anything
Yeah,
where
right.
they were trying
Yeah.
to, it was like, hey, come this way, and setting a trap, and like now my brothers can eat, right?
Yeah.
That's essentially
Mhm.
what was happening. And so that's like, I like that, like nice little sprinkle on top of like, hey, yeah, I mean, you know, some of these people, and Jack and I were lucky enough to read the first three iterations. Now I'm going to call them iterations.
I don't.
Episodes? What should I call them?
Chapters.
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 there
Thank you.
go.
Chapters.
Yeah.
That's how they use. That's what
Yeah.
they call it in literary terms. First, we got to read the first three chapters, and now I'm realizing that, you know, our main protagonist Candala gets invited into into the society deep into where only nobility is allowed. It's like, how many of those people are Butos?
Yeah.
Right. So while now what's really cool about this is that you don't really know who could possibly be, have that ulterior motive of like, I'm trying to take this person here, right? I'm not one that needs to consume. I lead them into the trap, right? And there's
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, which is a lot of fun.
It becomes organized crime.
Organized, yeah, it really is. It's organized crime. It's
Yeah,
organized
it's like the
human consumption. It's a human meat market.
Right, and I guess my question is now, what is that structure look like for the Butos? You know, like, because, you know, there's always a system in place, because, you know, they obviously they're not pack animals. They're intelligent, like devious creatures, and they probably are as intelligent, if not more intelligent, than humans. So is there that superstructure that kind of mirrors is there a caste system for the Butos in the same way that there's a caste system for humans?
There is. Actually, there is. Because that's why there's a demon king and such, right? Because they do have a caste system. But the difference is that they can move up the rank just based on their strength. So you can move up the rank by challenging someone in the upper rank and gain rank. That's why they try to eat the human with the strongest life force. That's why they try to infiltrate. They want to be stronger to climb higher in the society.
In some ways, the Butos have a more fair system.
Yeah, right. The demons have a more fair system.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but also interesting. But also I have to add something. Jack said that they're not pack animals, but they form packs. They hunt in packs. In the lore, there are usually always there's at least 3 of them.
Okay.
yes, at least there's three of them. And but they, well, as a monster, they don't care if they sacrifice their friends for the greater
Okay.
means or for
Sure.
personal means. So it's really is a society based on strength. So
Mm-hmm.
you cannot just disobey the one that's stronger than you.
Gotcha. Right, right,
Hmm.
right.
Yeah.
No, that's
But
really cool.
yeah. But
That
I
yeah.
also yeah.
Nope.
Oh, well, but I also think it's interesting too because you said that it's like one of the things that the Buto says right in that first chapter is you're going to such extreme measures to deal with us, like you're dancing with demons themselves in order to kill us. And I think
Hmm.
there's and then you started to talk about the brutality of the Buto's superstructure, hierarchical structure based um, purely on strength, and then we have this human structure which is based off of where you're born and how unequal it is, and the Candala to what they to their what they're doing is essentially mirroring what the Buto does, where they are taking as much power as they can in order to defeat them. And it's like you're kind of putting two systems right side by side of each other. It's like, are we so much different than the monsters that eat people's faces?
Sure,
You
sure.
know what I mean? And I think that's a kind of a cool thing that you're sort of juxtaposing.
Yeah, the Buto themselves. You can see it from the first interaction, right? Why you take so much extreme length, because they're the difference is the Buto think that they claim the prey, they took the strength of their prey for them and took it as their own strength. But the human actually not took it, but make a pact with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically not lending, borrowing the
Mm-hmm.
strength of others in cost of their self,
Yeah.
just
Mm,
to
right,
deal
right.
with the Buto, and to the Buto that is a disgrace.
Yeah.
Mm.
To the Buto
But
themselves, that's a disgrace. Fight me without your spirits.
Right,
Not like
right,
yeah,
right,
that.
right.
right.
I've
But
consumed mine. I've earned
yeah,
mine. You're
but yet,
Yeah.
borrowing
but yet,
yours.
but
Yeah,
yet,
yeah.
it's also more dangerous for the human almost because
Yes.
that's a pact. You don't control that. Like
Yes.
if you fail to uphold your end of that deal, you're gonna have to deal with a
Mm,
demon that's powerful enough to kill a Buto that you're not powerful
yes.
enough to kill by yourself. So it's
Hmm.
very it's a dance with the devil. You're
Uh,
you
True.
made a you've hitched your soul or your essence to something that will consume you without a second thought if it came
Hmm.
down to it.
Right.
Yes.
We've talked.
That that's
So
why
we've.
that's mhm. That's why there's a rift. Then there's no respect from the Buto to human, or from human to Buto. There's
Right,
no
Mm-hmm.
right.
respect in that side.
Okay.
So we've hammered down the Buto, I think, pretty well, and we have
Yeah.
yet to
Right.
talk
Yeah.
about the
The
title.
heroes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the title of the comic book, Candalas, right? And Candalas again, it's a part of that caste system of the lower caste, the outsiders, the undertakers, Undertaker. Sorry, I said
Takers.
Tanker.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the WWE stuff, and even though he was the Undertaker, everybody called him
Hmm.
Tinker, or at
Well,
least in
what?
certain
Well,
accents.
yeah.
It was a child.
One character said Tinker.
Tinker. They're Undertakers. They're the cell swords. They're the ones that deal with death. And so now that we have this setting, right? The Ramayana is
Hmm.
true. There's a headless demon king with a mountain on top of them. The Butos are out there and they're trying to consume human flesh, and they're matching and being able to transform their appearance to look like the people that they consume, building up their life forces. And now we have the Candala, right, that are essentially tasked with dealing with this problem, right? And,
Yeah.
one of the things that we'll just say really briefly here is that the nobility, and that we alluded to this before, the nobility, the upper caste that isn't on the outskirts of society, don't believe Butos are real. and yet the people in the lower caste are dealing with this on a regular basis and know that it's real. And the Candalas are really the only solution that these people have, spending what little money that they have to hire these Candalas to go and solve this problem and rescue people, family members.
And the Candalas get no respect.
So
like in that second chapter, the guy threw the coins at her face because he didn't bring back his daughter.
Well, don't really feel too much. We need these people to buy the comic. So so why don't you dive into the Candalas within this context, within the world's context, and talk about those earthbound spirits. Some of the weapons, the ceremonial weaponry that they're using, and kind of their role in society.
Well, just to make it clear that the practice of using a weapon with spirits in it is always tied in the Indonesian culture. You can ask any part of Indonesia, they will believe in the same thing, and that's why I took that belief and make it that if you supposed to fight with something supernatural, of course you will take the extreme means by using the supernatural as well. It's like fighting fire with fire.
Right.
So these spirits, there's a lot of them. There's a bunch of them in Indonesia, especially in the medieval times. There's really a lot of them, but many are fading with the tides of times. So I can only find several of them, and well, I also took some spirits, demons that came from mythologies, that came from the local legends, that came from urban legends from that time, and many more as well, and tied them in Indonesian from Indonesian mythology to Candala, to the story of Candala, because to them that time they are not myth, they are not something fantastical, they're real.
Right.
They're very much real in Indonesia. Even the habit that Indonesian people use, there's usually something that got to do with the spirits that are in the area. For example, there's this ghost called Walton. It's usually disguised as a child playing in the river.
Okay.
In the daytime, you see it just a regular child. It will become another child, real one, live one, to play with him in the river. But when the sun sets, the child will got trapped in another dimension along with the ghost, and the ghost will show his true form, which is a kid with no cranium, and there's embers of fires in his head. Right. So that's why there's a habit that if the sun is setting, no kids should play near the river.
Right.
So even the habit in each region usually ties in with its unique ghost that spirits or demons that exist in that region.
Right.
That's why I use them. I collect them and I use them.
And from what we were discussing in our pre-pod conversation is that there is going to be an introduction of a lot of stuff like that. That's like like you were saying, Indonesian people are going to be like, oh hey, I know this. And for the Western audiences, we're going to be like, "Whoa, what the hell's going on here?" Which is good, and I think that's such a from both a story consumption side of things, it's going to be really refreshing, but it's also extremely interesting, right? Because, like you said, the Indonesian people, the Majapahit Empire at that time, and in this reality, these spirits were real. This was real life. This was stuff that people were dealing with.
And I'm thinking, because one of the things you said is that there are so many of these spirits that have just been lost to time, and that's a real thing that happened. Like, you can't find some of these things anymore.
Right.
And it's because the stories kind of drifted, or people moved out of these places, and you just no longer hear about these. But I'm thinking, and it's like, that's a cool storytelling thing, because if they're real, why would they have forgotten? Is there a way
yes.
to have killed these spirits? Is there a way to have somehow they've passed through to a different, they've achieved their goal? Like, what if that child's
Yeah.
goal was to scare people away from the river at night
Ooh.
because the tide would come in and it would lift the kid down the river
Well,
or
of
something.
course, yeah.
You know, something like that where it's like, oh, now they figured it out. Now I don't have to, and they can fade off. Or, you know,
This I was thinking that maybe more or less that there was a ritual in which they were able to trap a spirit, and the only way that spirit can come out if anybody mentioned that name again. They can't mention the name. That's one of the things that would protect
something
them.
like something
like a vow of silence almost of like I can only.
Because I was
Which is actually kind of cool, transmedia wise. What we could do, I got an idea of that was something I've been I've been talking to a couple of people about. But we'll get there. We haven't even talked about the main story.
Well, no, but just as this is a thought experiment, because you know you can think of maybe there are people that are spirit catchers, like they catch them, like you said, they trap them or something.
They got to catch them all.
Maybe. Well,
that's
interesting
joke.
Interesting because there is.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Look at that. Yes, that's why there's a practice of using a weapon with spirits in it, because there is. Because there is.
Okay,
cool. And sometimes.
So you must have already thought about this.
And sometimes they're just make a pact of them with them, and then the spirits have a kingdom of their own. So just go back to your realm and kingdom and don't go back into human realm, and we just seal it with that. So there's a practice of like that too as well. And of course I will touch that matters as well in Candala.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, okay. And, you know, and we haven't really talked about the actual medium itself. I mean, it's absolutely beautifully drawn. I mean, the images and the style is absolutely gorgeous. So it's not even. I mean, if the story world wasn't interesting enough, it's also really nice to look at.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's a piece of art in and of itself. So if we were just to take the images and leave it at that. So our story of Candala, right? Candala, as this audience already knows now, is a caste within the outside of society.
The expendables.
The expendables.
That deal
they fight,
with death.
And they're fighting these Buto, right? And killing them, and is trying to do their best as they can to protect the people that they care about. So our Candala is named Ayu. Why don't we just kind of dive in just a brief introduction to who Ayu is and how did they end up becoming a Candala?
Yes. So Ayu is just a normal girl from you. She's not always a Candala. She's not always a Candala. She's a Sudra. She's a daughter of a merchant and live happily with her sister. But then during one task of delivery, along with her sister, they are attacked by a pack of Buto. And during that time, during the incident, one of the Buto actually ate her sister and took the appearance of her sister. And so that time, Ayu just went down into case of Candala by her own volition.
Yeah.
Just to hunt the Buto that ate and took the appearance of her sister.
Yeah.
Yes, so that's the base. That's the base story of it. That's the mission, the main mission of it, of the story.
It does highlight too that in this caste system you can always go down, right? Like it's not you can't go up, but you can go down, right? So her choosing to go from a merchant down to a Candala, it was a conscious choice. You could always, right? And I think even too, and I'm sorry, I should have written down all the casts. I didn't write them down. But one of the lower, below Candala, or maybe it is Candala, there are, you know, like the criminals, the people that have been kind of out, like put out to the outside of society. So your actions really do have, your decisions, you can always go down, right? If you end up, you could be a noble and,
Yes, it's easier to go down than to go up in the society. Unlike the Buto can challenge the upper ranks and gain gain their position there. But
Yeah.
in the human society, you cannot always do that. Well, you can go up
Right.
by means of like a marriage, for example, or
Sure.
even became disciple of someone in the higher ranks, in the higher
Yeah.
case of the society, or even just try to climb yourself with achievements, because
Right.
some of the nobles, some of the heroes in Indonesian legends and history actually came from the lower caste, which gain great achievement in battle. They're volunteer or they're conscripted as a soldier, and then they gain achievement, and they are granted as the prize. They're granted the caste of kshatriya. Something is quite similar happened in all of the part of the world as well. You're
Yeah.
now knighted as
Right.
a
Right. Right.
something like that, something like that. But that
Right.
happens too. So it's much
Yeah.
easier to go down,
Right.
but not to go up. Especially if you go down to Paria to Candala, you can never go up again.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. It's almost like the blood's on your hands.
Yeah, right.
You know,
Yes.
no matter how much you wash or what clothes you would put on, you would still have the blood of Butos on your hands. So yeah, so we have Ayu's out there, and it's literally she has dedicated herself almost like a monk dedicates themselves to a life of solidarity and no, well, not solidarity, but to a specific style of life.
Solidarity and peace.
Solidarity.
She devoted
celibacy.
herself.
Well, not her.
No,
Not her.
just
No, solidarity.
I think discipline is the only thing that a monk and Candalas have in common.
Sure. Yeah. Right. Yeah. They're very different. I shouldn't have used. The other option was going to be like a missionary or something, a celibacy or whatever.
Right,
but the idea is a
further,
vow to do something.
Yeah.
Right. It's a vow. It's a discipline to stay. To find that Buto, to remove that Buto that killed her sister, of which they were very close. So. We talk. It hasn't been hit on just yet. It seems like at the end of the chapter 3, we're going to start to see a little bit more of Ayu's training and how what kind of ceremonial stuff they had to do. Because what is the spirit that's connected to Ayu?
But before we get into that spirit, I wanted to ask, because in that 3rd chapter, the one guy has the noble has, or the person who orchestrated this meeting between Ayu and the noble has said that this is the person, this is the Candala we need to get this Buto, and it's because she's connected to this spirit. That doesn't seem like it's a very common practice with Candala, is it? Or in just is what she's, is her connection to that spirit a unique thing, or is it something that's because obviously when they said unleash yourself, and in there everybody was like, what did you do that for? This is dangerous. Is there a little more volatile about her? Well, and this goes back to her devotion. Is she unique in that respect?
Just to make it of course, Western audience won't recognize the shape of the spirit that Ayu has, but yes, but the shape of the spirit that Ayu has, especially when she's transformed, is actually the shape of Garuda.
Okay.
Which is a race that always became the steed of gods. But this one is on fire. Which is actually that Garuda is no longer alive, so it became an evil spirit, so it's a fallen one. But if you read the chapter 3 again, you will see that the Brahman that recommend them to the noble actually said that these two has a disaster class spirits. Which mean in Indonesia there's also a practice when a natural disaster occurs, there's always a spirit to blame to it. So one of them are that one, it's called si jago merah. So in Indonesia, if you have a news of fire or a forest fire, they always say that
Mm.
uh, si jago merah ate the building. They use a
Yeah.
moniker like
Okay.
that. Si jago merah
I got it.
consume the forest because they always have a figure of spirits to blame to it. If there's a
Okay.
quake, you will say it's the naga of Naga Besuki.
Mhm.
Okay.
It's a dragon that resides in the earth. And if
Okay.
there's storm, you have another spirit to blame. If
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
if there's a hurricane, oh, it's the Nyi Roro Kidul. It's the queen of the southern seas.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah,
it's not that she's connected to a spirit. It's the class of spirit she's connected to.
yes,
That's the unique part about it.
The consumption
yes,
of
that's
fire.
Okay, so now
That's very
okay,
cool.
so now well, right, but I figured, it might because with when you get into a new type of story, you start like I'm piecing something together, but I don't have all the parts to it. I'm imagining that as we get further in, we're gonna meet other
yes,
Kandalas that have different spirits, and you're gonna
yes,
start to realize, oh, this is why she's unique. This
Yeah.
is why because it's a very volatile disaster.
Right.
I imagine it was very hard to match with this or connect to this spirit. Very hard to corral that spirit.
Yeah. Yeah. But very
mm-hmm.
powerful to
But
do
very
it as well.
powerful. Once you do it, it's very powerful.
Right.
But again, also could be considered very dangerous.
And then you could also say that potentially because of her search for revenge is the reason why,
Right.
which
is why
she
maybe,
chose to be a Kandala.
Yeah.
Right. And by the way, we're just piecing this together for the audience. This
We're-
might be true. This might not be true.
Yeah. Right. We don't.
We're
know.
just kind of
Riffing.
spitballing. But it seems like to
Yeah, right.
me that it would, like because of the intense hatred.
Yeah. A certain amount of anger,
right.
rage, and would
choosing to be a Kandala too.
that would help aid you in that trying to mesh with that spirit.
Almost
That-
attracting it.
Right. That spirit might be like, I need to be with you,
Right.
kind of
you
thing.
right. You're a destruction. So it's all really good stuff. I mean, we can keep on going on. I want people to purchase and read this comic book. It's on ToonTube. The link will be in the description. It's like $3. It's like a cup of coffee. So don't go to don't go to Subway to get coffee.
Yeah,
Don't go to Starbucks to get coffee, which I think might be could probably get 2 issues for a single coffee.
Yeah.
It's really cool, and as we've been talking about the world itself, the setting, and all of this crazy stuff that's going on in the background, then leads to a very interesting read of the comic book. Like if you were to read it straight, you would still enjoy it, but now with this background, I mean,
Yeah, right.
you can
It
really
becomes
be
a
like,
lot more
oh,
interesting.
what's going on?
Like, I mean, I don't know. You in the third chapter, you really helped us with that third chapter because there's a lot of things that are piquing my interest in that third chapter. But even like talking about who her master was,
right.
I'm like, who is this master? Because it's like something to do. I'm like,
Vidya.
Yeah, but it was
Vidya, yes.
But it was of the sword, like he or she or they were doing something with the sword, like something about their weapons. I imagined. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm like, I need to know more about this person too. It's like all these layers are
great story.
Yeah, all these layers are coming to, like, how do you like to your what we were talking about earlier? It's like, how do you trap these spirits into these weapons, or how do you forge these spirits into these weapons? That has to be. I can't imagine that not being an intense experience or story.
Yeah. Actually, that part will be very tie in with Ayu, because later on, maybe in several chapter more, it will be divulged as how and why you can see Ayu spirit has different forms. When she call it, there's a dancer's form, that's the standard form, and then there's the Garuda form. But later on, as the story progress, you will know why it has different forms, why it has different representations, and it's also tied in how to trap the spirit inside the blade actually. So it will be divulged later.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that'd be
So,
really cool. I mean, I'm thinking about
well,
as we transition into some new transmedia content, like that would be really cool. If like a book of almost of like how to do that, right? Like
yeah,
if you're flipping through, like, oh, this kind of like this is how you would go about doing it.
yeah,
Which would be kind of a fun thing to read up on. For the audience, Risky showed us some images of the ceremonial sabers and swords, and as you know, Jack's obsessed with that kind of stuff. So, I mean, they look really cool.
yeah.
And when we talk about like, as a transmedia piece of the story of like a book of how to trap a spirit, and then you have to buy the sword or forge a sword, do certain things, right? You could feel like you're a part of this world because it's like I can participate in this, and my sword is designed specifically for this earthbound spirit, or once again, like depending on whether it's a more of a chaotic or more of a, and once again, we don't even know what the other types are for these spirits. That's a really cool way to kind of expand the story and get really people into the mindset, right? Of like,
yes,
I'm reading Candala, like I got this thing, man. Like I have the same sword as she does, or I have a different one because that's just not my not my style. I'm not very chaotic. So that's really cool. This whole story world, it's just chock full of folkloric base, right? And whenever and people that have listened to this podcast before know our conversation with Nick Jones about folklore. Folklore is something he's working on something else. We might have him on the podcast again pretty soon. About folklore-esque, which is the taking of folklore, or not taking of folklore and like reusing it for other pieces, but story worlds developing their own folklore, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Which is true within that world.
Right.
And so while right now Candala is so based in the Ramayanas, the reality of that, there are going to be certain elements that, like we were saying, like the hundreds of tribes, hundreds of languages, right, in the Majapahit Empire, all these little, the 1800 islands, they all have their different tellings of the epic, of other epics that have to deal with the Butos.
Of the ghost, of the boy ghost in the river. They all have different versions of it. Maybe in one, he has twigs in his hair as his head in this, in not flames. You know what I mean? There's like different little things based off of disasters that have happened in each of those places.
And each one of those is chock full of new ways of telling, or new experiences for the audience on these different islands. And each of them, we're talking about that one general that I'm going to have to ask you what his name was again, that was going through and was really responsible for spreading the Majapahit Empire to these small islands. And we were saying on our pre-conversation, there's no way he didn't have a couple of Candala with him, because in this world, if he's conquering those islands, the Butos have to be there too.
Yeah.
Like they're going to run into some stuff.
He's got to have some spiritual aids for sure.
Right.
Yeah, his name is Gajah Mada. And also, yes, he is known to have some kinds of supernatural power of himself as well.
Right,
and he's the conqueror. Yeah, well, you can think him as like Alexander the Great, but he's not the king. He's actually the right hand of the kings or the queens that during that time, and he's the one that control the military in Majapahit Empire. And the legend says that he can control the fogs, then actually make the enemy hard to mobilize. And he always use some unusual tactics. Some of them are underhanded tactics, really underhanded tactics that became the incident, became the one the most popular one is the Bubat incident, where he sent invitation of marriage to the enemy kingdom just to lure the king, the prince, and also the princess to go to their kingdom, and midway he attacked them.
Oh, good.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's called the Bubat incident, and that's messed up. But that's his tactic, because no way you can conquer all of the kingdom in the whole 18,000 islands without an underhanded tactics.
No. Well, and you can only do that one time too, folks. So if you're deciding you're going to go conquer something, you can only do that once before other kings aren't going to fall for the same trap.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So yes. But yes.
What do they say? All's fair in love and war, and that had love and war in it.
Yeah, right. But yeah, his expositions out there, campaigns, is another really cool. And there could be a whole bunch of different different mediums that story could be told on, from the viewpoint that he does have control over the fog, right?
Yes.
And the dealings of the expansion of the Majapahit Empire, which was all trade, but it was a lot of maritime power, right? Like they had to be able to control the seas, because that's like they didn't have roads. Right? It was like they had straits and stuff. And so just such a really cool and such a really interesting period of history that, once again, in the Western world, not a lot of exposure to it, but such a rich basis. And yeah, I mean, cannot recommend reading Candala highly enough, because I mean, I can just see so much great new things coming out of it. The one piece of transmedia content that struck me about the idea of the having these spirits within the real world and then trapping them, right, or banishing them, or living with them, or something like that. I was talking to a friend of mine, another transmedia producer, and we were talking about this one YouTube channel. I wish I knew what it was called. I don't have it on anymore. That their whole goal was they were going to make content for a year, and then after that year was up, they deleted all that content. So you literally had, if you weren't there for it, you were going to miss it, and it was very much a period of time type thing. And we were talking about different ways that you could do that in story worlds, and how cool that is. If it was, once again, we're talking about these spirits and all this folklore that was lost to history, right? Within the Indonesian, the Majapahit Empire, and in the Candala universe we're talking about, you can make up some of these spirits based off of things that we have no record for modernly right now. And it could be one of those things that the story, maybe it's an audio story, maybe it's a series of short stories, that at a certain point, if because of the actions of within that story they banish that spirit, that all that gets removed. And then what you end up doing there, which is really cool within the audience, and that's a folklore-esque type thing, is that in order for a new audience to understand what happened in that story, they have to be told by an audience member. Right? It has to be passed down, and all of a sudden that story changes ever so slightly, depending on what area you're in, who told it to you. Right? Which is a really cool thing. It's an expansion of this idea, of the, finding new ways to engage a fandom and to build that community, is having stories that only the fandom can tell, because they don't exist anymore, right? And a lot of cool ways that you do that. If it's via like a weekly podcast or something like that, that's audibly told, would be really cool. If it was actually in person, it would be even cooler, because then there would be no record of it. Everybody's phone has to be over here in a bucket somewhere as I tell this story, and then having to transcribe that to new people, new fans, or like, I don't know anything about the spirits. Like, well, let me tell you, because you cannot find record of this anymore. But this is the story of this banished spirit or whatever. Yeah, and people could also start making up stories. You would never be able to know. Right. Of but that's the point, right? Just like you said, on one island, perhaps this river child has sticks that are on fire, and then in another one, it's coals that are on fire. But the main message is still the same, even though the spirit changes shape, or the meaning behind it changes a little bit. Like the core to fit the area, right? The landscape or whatever. It's still, the core is still there, right? And that's what's really cool about folklore, right? And that's what you're discovering here too. Yeah. Even though things have been lost, I mean, if you went to all of these islands, all 18,000, I've been saying 1,800, apparently it's And that's what's really fun about a story world, and that's what's fun about what you're creating.
Yes.
So we're at our hour mark.
Yeah.
We usually end off with you giving. We didn't tell you about this, and that's kind of the
Uh-huh.
whole shtick, right?
Mhm.
Of doing like a quick little pitch for people to go in and buy in to the idea. Like, what would you tell somebody? It's an elevator pitch or something like that. Of like, this is the reason why you should go right now to ToonTube. Once again, in the description, you can just click on it. You don't have to write down the URL. Why should they go in and start on this journey with you, and read Candala as you're writing it?
Yeah. So I guess I'll start with, well, you already know the tales of King Arthur. You also know the gods of the Norse mythologies.
Right.
Well, and maybe you know as well some other legends, some other Greek gods or pantheons as well, but you might never heard a story about Indonesian mythology or medieval Indonesian fantasy, especially dark fantasy. And that's what you will get. Something that's really new, something that really fresh for you, and something that may be a bit squeamish for you. Maybe if you seek something that can make you a bit uncomfortable or maybe unusual for your daily understanding, for your modern standards, because we're talking about the age of the old, the age of the legends, the age of the
Yeah.
mythology in the country that you mostly never heard of,
Right.
in the time period that is lost by time,
Right.
in one of the greatest kingdom in Southeast Asia, but with so little records of it. Because I
Yeah.
can guarantee you, you will always find something new inside the story of Chandala.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why you should try and read.
I'm telling you, you're gonna want to continue to read it, and because it's very good. It's like I said, it's absolutely beautiful to just look at, and then once again, the story itself, the world itself. I mean, so much potential, so much history, so much stuff to like bite into. And when we talk to creators on Store World Explorers, we want to find that thing to bite into, right? Something that's like, I'm going to be able to continue to come back to this because there's so
Yeah.
many more stories. I can get lost here, which is that's what we're looking for. We got goosebumps. So, Risky, thank you so much for joining us. This
Thank
has been
you.
great. And yeah, well, if I also end off the podcast. I end it off many different ways. Actually, it never ends. We just continue on.
He has more endings
I
than
have
the
more
last.
endings than beginnings?
He has more endings than the last. What was it? The Return of the King in Lord of the Rings.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. With all the
false
is this
endings.
it? Oh no, there's 20 minutes left. If you need anything from us, or if you think that we can help in any which way, all you have to do is ask. That's what we're here for. And if it's as long as we can somehow figure out how to do it, we will help you with it.
Thank you.
Your success will be our success, and our success will be your success. So, yeah, really looking forward to the new stuff and the new chapters, man.
Thank you very much, and please look forward for it.
Thanks for adventuring with us, intrepid explorers. If you want more content like this,
yeah, we have several other very cool lore-based. Well, actually, you could learn a little bit more about folklore, or you could explore some other great sci-fi, crazy story worlds. This was a fantastic episode. I hope that everybody goes and at least you can see the teaser of the comic book for free. Like I said, like the art is just absolutely amazing.
Very riveting artwork.
We're hoping to do these more often. So hopefully we'll see you soon.
From viewers like you.
Thank you.